Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Black-Liberation.Tech podcast. I am your host, Dr. Renee Jordan, and today's topic is no homework equals do it yourself, DIY. So what I'm going to do is start by reading a blog post, and it was entitled, Looking Back, No Homework Equals DIY. I texted my niece this week to find out how her semester went and gave her a few pointers for next time. She said that I could share what we talked about. Hopefully, it will help someone else, me. What lessons did you learn this semester that you will try to remember or use next semester? Niece, spend more time studying the things that I don't know. Me, do you mark in your notes the things that you don't know? Niece, no, I didn't. Me, how do you know what you don't know? Niece, by studying it? Me, huh? Niece, I guess studying it would have helped me to know the information better. Me, when do you realize that you don't know something? Are you in class? While you're reading, while you're doing your homework or a project, when you're given a review guide, when you're taking a test? I study so that I know the information, but I didn't notice that I didn't know certain things until I took the test. For the class that I was having the most trouble with, we weren't given homework, but we were given labs. Which class was this? Niece, she shares the subject with 2 crying face emojis. Me, good morning. It's okay. Do you have to take any more of those classes? Niece, good morning. That was the only class that I had to take. Me, okay, then it will certainly be all right. If you had to take other such classes and needed to know the information you did not know for the new classes, then I would be concerned. Did you have reading assignments for that class? Niece, yes and no. She didn't tell us to read the chapters, but she expected us to. I did the reading and sometimes went back and took notes. Me, okay, there are different types of professors. I won't go into them all now, but this class is a learning opportunity in many ways. If the class has a textbook required reading, you should read them, take notes. Be sure to write down all of the words in bold and their definition. Answer the questions within the chapter. They might be in the margins or squares at the end of the section. Answer the chapter questions at the end of the chapter and the unit questions at the end of the related chapters. Test questions will either ask you what is in the textbook, how to use or apply what is in the textbook, how to connect the text to other texts or real life examples, or how to construct or create something based on the text. When taking notes, use the headings and subheadings to separate your notes. In the margins, be sure to include page numbers so that you know where to go back for more information. Do not try to copy the whole chapter. That is not taking notes. Turn the headings and subheadings into questions to help focus your reading and note-taking on what is most important. You can also look at the questions within and at the end of the chapters to help you decide ahead of time what is most important, what needs the most attention, and what you should know by the end of the chapter. As you write your notes, also write down your reactions to the text. Write them as if you were making comments that you would want to send to the author if he, she, or they was your teacher, classmate, or friend. You can even write questions that come to mind as you read. What would you want to say or ask if you had a chance? Write these things down as you read. And then when you go to class, ask these questions and make your comments aloud. If you have a question, then without a doubt, it never fails. Someone else has the same question, a similar question, or may learn something from you asking your question. Your voice is important in the classroom. You make the difference in a class that strictly has the teacher talking at, not to, the students, and one that revolves around the needs and interests of the students who are within the context of the subject matter. Okay, that's enough lecturing for today. Does this information make sense? Niece, yes, it makes sense. Thank you. I will do that next time a class is harder for me to grasp. Smiley face emoji. So that was my post from December 2017. And so I want to make sure that I emphasize it's important to reflect, do some self-reflection at the end of the semester and throughout the semester on how you feel you're doing in a class. So are you struggling? Are you noticing that you're struggling? Are you noticing that you're missing things when you go to take a test? Are you finding that you're seeing things when you're taking a test that you didn't know to look for? If you are, think about that and consider doing some changes. So I listed several things that you can do in order to make changes to your studying habits by taking notes and using your textbook and making connections with the text, not just what's within the text by asking questions or answering questions at the end of the chapters, but also coming up with your own questions. When you are reading, what are you curious about? Be engaged. That means you're doing more than just going past the words and saying, okay, so to summarize, this chapter was about X, Y, and Z. What stood out to you? What do you have questions about? What might you be overlooking? Make sure that you take those headings, the bold text, the information that's written in the margins, and even like those pulled out quotes into consideration when you are preparing notes. It's important to think about the things that you're doing during the course of the semester so that you can take corrective action. Now, at the end of the semester, it's also important to do some self-reflection in order to see how you can move forward and do better the next semester if there is a need for improvement. So think about how you're learning, what you're doing to help yourself learn, and know that if the professor is not giving you homework, that doesn't mean that you don't have homework. That means you need to design your own homework. You need to do it yourself. So those techniques that some teachers used in high school and even middle school can help you in college. The thing is, in college, if you're not getting the homework, if you're not getting the outlines, if you're not getting the study guides from the professor, that means you have to do it yourself. Hopefully you've had experiences in life where you had to do homework, where you had to do study guides, where you had to do chapter summaries and even short essays on the information that you've read. Take those practices moving forward and apply them specifically when you have a professor who's not assigning you a whole lot of homework. The more you interact and engage with the information that you're required to learn, the more it will stick with you. Now, in addition to taking notes and creating your own homework assignments for yourself by answering those questions that are in the textbook, feel free to Google and see what are some common questions about that subject matter. Where are the study guides for that subject matter? Somebody has written a study guide for the material that you're learning. In addition to notes, take a look and see what videos are out there that help capture the information and summarize it in a way that is more accessible to you. Perhaps the person has more inflection in their voice and it allows you to pay attention. Perhaps there's someone else who's able to break down the content that you're required to learn into smaller bite-sized pieces that are more accessible to you, more digestible, just easier for you to understand. And at the end of it all, you're able to get a big picture based upon those small pieces that they were able to break down. So once again, if you don't have homework, do it yourself. Find a way to get at the information either through your textbook or doing searches for study guides so that you can take those questions and see if you can answer them. See if you can create your own study guide and make sure that you're engaging in class and asking questions during class before the quiz and before the test, because when the test comes, that's it. It's time to find out what you really know. And so the time for asking questions is over. So make sure that you are engaged in class. If something seems fuzzy, if you feel like after a quiz, you don't understand why you missed the information that you missed, either make an appointment with the professor or make an appointment with your student services and see about getting a tutor to help you with that subject area. Many schools have tutors through student services. Find out how you can get a hold of a tutor. And if you don't find a tutor for that subject area, once again, get on the internet and see who breaks down that content into smaller bite-sized pieces pieces that are more manageable for you. For my niece, it wasn't until she took the test that she realized that she didn't know some things. Well, if there's still time and you've taken a quiz or you've taken a test and you realize that you missed something, partner up with someone and ask them questions. Ask your classmate, when was this information covered? Do you remember what chapter that was from? Was this a part of a lecture that I may not have paid attention to? Or was this part of the text? Or was this a part of some of the support reading? When I say support reading, I mean the readings that are in addition to your textbook. So your professor may assign you reading from your main textbook, but they also may assign you articles to read. And it could be that perhaps information was touched on in those supplementary articles that you missed and need to make sure that you study. But make sure that if you're finding out that you're missing something when you take a quiz or when you take a test, talk to a classmate. Find out, hey, I'm trying to do better next time. I don't know how you did, but I got these questions wrong. Do you know where they were covered? And think about, where were those things covered? Was it covered in the textbook? Was it covered in the supporting material? Was it covered during class? Or was it something that you had to go out and search for, like a project? Or was it something that your classmate learned as a result of going out and searching and finding information on their own? When you are taking notes, take a look at what you're writing. Are you simply copying down everything that's in the textbook, or are you hitting the most important things? Are you capturing things in small bite-sized pieces so that when you go back over it, it allows you to think about the total amount of information that has been covered? You can't just simply copy the book. That's not going to help you. You need to be able to create smaller pieces of information in your notes, either in bullet format or even creating diagrams. Maybe your book doesn't come with a diagram, but you need to create your own. How can you create a flow chart of the information if we're talking about processes? How can you make a diagram that shows the hierarchy of information? So let's say there's a one big picture, and then there's little pieces that are attached to that one big picture. And then there's even more smaller pieces attached to those pieces. So take a look at the information. How can you create a diagram, a chart, some kind of flow chart, some kind of infographic to help break up the information into smaller pieces that allows you to think about the information in their smaller pieces and keep in mind the big picture at the same time? Now, different professors will have different expectations for students. No two professors are alike. Some professors are actively engaged in creating active learning spaces, and they want to make sure that you get as much hands-on practice with the material in class so that you have questions. And please do make sure that you're asking questions when you're in those types of classes. Other professors, they may do the lecture style of instruction, and you will have to adjust accordingly. Those expectations are going to be different. The one who provides you all of those different touch points with the information by having an active learning class will say, hey, I've given you in-time practice with the material. You should be able to handle it. And the person who's doing the lecture expects you to be able to capture the information from what they're saying and capture the information based upon what you're reading or expected to read, and then be able to make connections either to the text or other readings or real life experiences or maybe case studies in your assessments in order to determine how well you've learned the information. When you have a challenging class, I want to encourage you to be the challenging student. Don't just sit there and say, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to make it. This is terrible. I don't understand what's going on. But say, I need help. Can you please clarify X, Y, and Z? Raise your hand, get your questions in, write down your questions based upon what you read. If there's something in the reading that you're not certain about, write a question. If something is not making sense, write a question. Ask all you can. Now, if there are teaching assistants, you might want to go to the teaching assistant for that class and say, hey, these are my questions. I read the information, but these are the questions that I was left with as a result of reading the information. This is what I looked up in order order to get a better understanding, can you confirm that this person, let's say you did a YouTube search to find someone to break down the information, and you say, hey, this is the information that I got from the YouTube video that I watched. Is this information okay? Does it align with what I'm supposed to be learning in class? Because sometimes people have different perspectives or different views that may impact the information that they're presenting, and it doesn't necessarily match what you're supposed to be learning in the class in terms of the course objectives. So make sure that you compare it with someone else and say, hey, is this what I'm supposed to be getting as a result of this class? I was having trouble with the reading, and so this is where I went in order to get more help. These are the things that they said, and as a result of reading the textbook, watching these videos, these are my notes that I have taken, and they include some questions. Can you please help me? Ask for help. There is a saying that there are no dumb questions. So please ask, ask, ask. Get help because you're there to learn. And in order to learn, if you have questions, you need to get answers before you are asked, before you have to take a quiz, a test, complete a paper, or a project. When I say be the challenging student, I'm not saying object in class, but say, hey, I am going to disrupt this class with my questions and find out exactly what it is that I need to do in order to do well. And don't just sit there and say, well, I'm just not going to do well in this class. Take on the challenge and say, hey, I have to be proactive about the way I'm studying in this class, and these are the steps that I'm going to take. So once again, if you're in a class and you are not getting a lot of homework, it means you have to do it yourself. Take control of your own learning experience. Don't just fall by the wayside and say, this professor just didn't teach in a way that I was able to access the information. Find out how you can work through a challenging class by doing your homework yourself, whether that's taking notes, asking questions, finding alternative resources, pairing up with a classmate, finding out where you're missing information. Perhaps there's a pattern that the professor has in terms of making sure that the reading from the textbook is paired up with alternative readings, because sometimes those alternative readings will give you examples of what is happening in the text that will help you to learn the information. Make sure that you get your questions out in class. Don't just write them down and keep them to yourself, but ask your professor, ask the teaching assistant, ask your classmates, go to student services, find a tutor. If there aren't tutors there, go online and find someone who breaks down the information into smaller digestible pieces. When you're taking notes, don't just copy down the whole book. Make sure that you are creating your own charts, your own infographics, whether those are as simple as Venn diagrams when you're comparing processes, or hierarchy charts that show the big picture, the next level, and then the lower level, whether those are processes, step 1, step 2, step 3. Make sure that you are creating images in your notes that will also help you to grasp the information better and keep the bigger picture in mind. Once again, thank you for listening to another episode of the Black-Liberation.Tech podcast. I am your host, Dr. Renee Jordan. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share, as well as rate and review the podcast to make it more discoverable. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.